Representative Ashley Bland Manlove, State Rep 26th District, Kansas City. My bill is House Bill 286, and it allows for civil action for summoning a police officer. Now, I know this seems kind of broad, but here's the gist. There was this thing that, it's really been tracked by the FBI since about 2013. It's called swatting, and that is where let me give you an example. December 2017, 28-year-old Andrew Finch was killed in his home in Wichita, Kansas. Mind you, I live in Kansas City, Missouri, which is literally, I can see Kansas from my doorstep. So very, very close. So he was killed in his home in Wichita, Kansas, from a swatting incident. The young man was in California and used the internet. He was basically contacted by a friend in Kansas, and it was over a Call of Duty game. And I guess Andrew was playing somebody and was beating them, so then that person that he was beating called a friend. The friend ended up using the internet to call the police and basically said, I've killed my husband, and I've got the rest of the family, and I've put gasoline all over the house. This then escalates the call, so then that immediately makes SWAT come out. He answered the door, and he was unfortunately killed as soon as the interaction started. So that's what swatting is. Swatting is it's supposed to be a prank sometimes, but it's also done out of revenge. And it's basically a prank call saying, hey, this emergency situation is happening, and we need you to come right now. And so then the police, as they do, as their job, to come in full force to neutralize the situation. As I said, sometimes this happens online, but this can also be done over the phone using different apps to say, I'm inside the house, or I'm close to the house, or I'm the neighbor looking in the house, and I can see this happening. In 2019, the Congress tried to pass this bill, but Corona and other issues came about, so unfortunately it did not make it out of committee. And we also have to think about the cost it costs thousands of dollars every time SWAT is deployed. So we don't want that done frivolously. So, into my bill. This is similar to the bill that Representative Roberts holds as well. My bill is kind of like the front end, what creates what actions create you being able to use this, and then his is the kind of the back end, what's the punishment for it. So if we walk through, a person may bring civil action for damages against any person who knowingly, so this is malicious intent, so I don't want to hear any about that, you can't prove it, because it's knowing. And we have been able to prove it because there's videos or other people who are around the case who have said, yeah, they hired me, yeah, so this can be proven. Knowingly causes a police officer to arrive at a location to contact another person with the intent to. So knowing intent to infringe upon another person's rights. We don't like that. We don't want nobody taking away our guns, right? So we don't like people infringing upon our rights. Unlawfully discriminate against another person. An example of such, and I really don't like to use the black card, but here's the situation. I've found at least 3 national cases and 2 personal cases that I know of lawmakers who are going around and campaigning in areas where maybe it's not traditionally a black lawmaker, and so people are then apprehensive and call the police. This specifically happened to a friend of mine in Jackson County. So we don't want anybody to unlawfully discriminate. It says cause another person to feel harassed, embarrassed, or humiliated. I understand that is very hard to prove, and if this was rolled into a committee sub, I'd be very willing to take that line out. Causes the other person to be expelled from a place in which the person is lawfully located, or damages another person's property, reputation, or withstanding in the community, financial or business prospects, and interest. Representative Roberts talked to me specifically about about a situation where he had, and I have documents here. Business rivalries are still a thing. So, one business owner has this, product, and then the next business owner, they don't want them to have that product as well. So then they might call the police saying that, they've got a codes violation or they're doing something unlawful in there. I have an article here out of the Kansas City Star from February 3rd of this year. Independence business owner heads to prison for conspiring to burn down a rival store. So this is still very active. This also happens if you think about partners sometimes who are separating and who are, upset for one reason or another. The other partner's moved on. You're not seeing your kids the way you want to, whatever the gripe might be. So then you call the police to try and intentionally get the other partner in trouble so that you can have whatever you want. The greater of damages for emotional stress or statutory damages of $250. In my conversations with Representative Roberts, he said that $250 should actually be struck because if this is a situation that deters you from being able to work, that's probably going to be more than $250. And if somebody calls the police on you and directly affects your job, say you're a lawmaker or a teacher or somebody who's around kids or the sick, that they immediately suspend you. Even if you're an officer and you get a false call for domestic, I know they've experienced that. So you are immediately, so that's going to be a serious deduction from your pay. So punitive damages, of course, attorney's fees, and this might be brought to small claims court. Other states that have similar laws to this or are working on passing similar laws to this are both red and blue. New York, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Oregon are all actively working on legislation like this. Going through the fiscal note, it says that there's no impact. The biggest kind of concern that was mentioned in the fiscal note was excessive amounts of time in court for the officers involved in these cases. But if we do our due diligence, I think that investigations quelch any excess use of that, because that's the point, is to make sure that it's a legit case. But I'm not a cop, so I'm just making assumptions. So my response, yes, if the cases are investigated as usual, these officers would be in court already for defamation of character or something like that. So that's a moot point. We're adding provisions to make sure these aren't frivolous and to verify that these people have been wronged. Also, there was a point in the fiscal note about officers. So it mentioned the state legal fund, which is if an officer or municipality is being sued. This is not in reference to that. This is in reference to the civilian who has just called the officer. I don't see it, but I did talk with the Anti-Defamation League, who brought the bill to Representative Roberts, and they said they're okay with it, and they were going to try and get a response in before the hearing, but it was kind of short notice when I finally got in contact with them. Also, don't know if this is helpful for you guys, but the ACLU also supports this bill. And with that, I'll take any questions.
Any questions for the representative?
Yes, sir.
Let's go. We'll start left to right. Representative Cook, proceed.
Permission to inquire.
Proceed.
Just a question on this, and thank you for bringing this forward. You have a civil suit against the person who would call this in. Obviously, law enforcement would have to arrive, maybe even fire, EMS. And they might have to take action and have undue stress put on them from this situation as well. What about the possibility of them suing this person, having a civil suit also, for their department or even for the officer or fire department or EMS. What's your thoughts on that?
I had not discussed that, but I'm willing to.
Okay, thank you.
Further questions, Representative Hardwick, proceed.
To inquire.
Proceed.
Good morning, Representative.
Morning.
One concern I have about this bill is under the language, a person could call law enforcement and make a report that's entirely truthful about what's happening, an incident or a danger. But if we prove that their motive is bad, that they intended to do something bad to the person whom law enforcement was called upon, then there's a civil cause of action. And that makes this different than filing a false report, or it makes it different than even defamation, which requires falsity, because we're creating a cause of action where somebody could be entirely truthful to police for a serious or legitimate danger. And so how do you address that? And you know, do you concur there's a problem with, if there's a truthful report, we create a cause of action for somebody's sort of mental state and motive?
Yes and no. I think that's the point of the investigation. But I see your point, and if there is some clarifying language that you would be willing to help me draft, I would be open to rolling that as well. That's a very niche kind of situation. So, I mean, that's kind of like, well, what if this one time in band camp somebody does? That's very hard to address. There's always going to be those kinds of situations, or there's always going to be that one thing. Like I've heard, well, what if a bad person uses this against somebody? And I'm like, that's like, what if a criminal tries to manipulate this in some kind of way? And I'm like, well, that's the point of a criminal. They always try to manipulate even the best of laws in some kind of way. So I don't know how we prevent that. But what we can do is help the people who are suffering. We talk a lot about tort reform in this body, but how are we helping and clarifying so that it's not that you can't sue, because this is America, you can sue, but how are we clarifying laws to make sure that the right people are doing it? And that's what my intent was.
I think the general solution would be to make it so people can't file false reports, or they can't lie and waste police officers' times or use lies to harass.
Yeah. Unfortunately, human will and stuff, so we can't control that.
We can quantify whether something is true, or we can quantify whether there was a person there shooting at the scene, but it's difficult to quantify whether or not somebody intended to remove somebody unlawfully or intended to harass. So how does this bill quantify the bad motives of the person calling 911 or calling the police officer? Well,
as we've seen, even when incidences are fully played out on video, some people can still find loopholes in ways of defense. So again, as long as the evidence is there, then we should move forward. But as I said, the line about feeling harassed, I am very willing to take out. And that line was actually brought to my attention by someone I think who's on this committee, McDaniel, when I spoke to him, and I filed this in 2018. This is my second crack at trying to get this heard. So I spoke with him, and I spoke with Barry Hovis, actually. And I want to say possibly Bill Kidd, too. So I'd really try to get the advice of people who I respected and who are in law enforcement to find those loopholes. As I said, I'm very willing to take out that line about feeling harassed, because that one is, as they told to me, difficult to prove.
Any further questions for the witness? Representative Taylor, proceed.
Actually, I'd just like to make a comment, if I may, Mr. Speaker. Or Chairman. Listening to you, well, first, thank you for bringing this forward. Listening to your stories about the things that can lead up to this or cause this, I can just go back in my brain and think about the news stories I've seen where somebody's called the police on someone who wasn't doing anything wrong, and just to basically
waste
harass.
Of money too. Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry.
A complete waste of money as well.
Exactly,
yes,
exactly. So I was glad to hear that line about the harassment and embarrassment. That was one that was a stickler for me. But in listening to you describe these things, I just wanted to point out to you that later on, when red flag laws come up, I want you to keep in mind that that's exactly some of the same reasons that some of us oppose red flag laws, because of people calling up and making false reports to get somebody else in trouble. So
Totally.
I just want to bring that up. So
I understand that. I believe in the red flag laws as somebody who has proven that they have abused somebody. So somebody who has police reports filed, somebody who has actually served time, shouldn't be allowed. So I think we can agree on a lot of that.
thank you.
Any further questions for witness Representative Walsh?
Thank you to inquire. Yeah, I think this is a tough situation because I think you bring in a lot of good things. I mean, definitely nobody wants to have somebody knowingly calling police just to cause trouble for them, and I think I really do applaud you for your efforts there. I do lean though, and I've struggled with this language in the past when this bill has been filed in the past, just because of the same concerns that were actually articulated by Representative Hardwick. With if there's a way to be able to say it and it just differently, because again. Because intent is difficult to prove, and I guess my only fear in some of this language, which has always caused me pause, and possibly I can't remember if I voted no on this if it came that far in the past, but it would be the language that would actually get to where, because as a society we do tell people if they see something to say something, and especially in today's era, so for things to be reporting, and so. That's where I struggle with this. So I am interested to see, I think some of the things Representative Hardwick said about maybe possibly some of the rephrasing and things like that, I would be interested in kind of seeing if, just as an offline conversation with some of that, because if we can get to a point where it kind of addresses those concerns, but then still helps address the concerns you bring, I think that would be good, and that'll be the best bill that we can have in this respect. So just some comments kind of on that, too. I want you to see where I'm coming from.
I do, and that's been the overarching concern. That's been the overarching concern. Again, I'm not the law enforcement professional, so I'm definitely willing to work with those who are.
Like the representative is willing to work with anybody on the committee, so.
Who
further questions for the
Thank you
witness?
very much.
Representative Pfeiffer, proceed.
To inquire?
Proceed.
You spoke about the other bill. You talked about that was the back end. Am I understanding that this would be the civil rights in terms of going to court versus perhaps a criminal case against somebody who would do this falsely? Is that the difference between the other bill and this one?
No, both of ours say civil.
They're both civil.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
But his goes into mine's like notwithstanding to the laws that are already out there, and then his clarifies the punishments. So mine doesn't really touch the punishments. His goes into like misdemeanors and stuff like that. So already you can, like we said, defamation of character or something like that. You can file those, and those are the criminal side. But those criminal sides do not have a civil side attached to it. So the person, still might do time, but you never compensate that wage lost. You never get that part back. So we're trying to fix that part of it.
Okay. Thank you very much.
All right. Further questions for the representative? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony. Anybody here in support of House